Great. Okay. Awesome. All right. My name is Brady Gaster, and today we're going to talk about real-time clouds. Or I guess we should say real-time cloud, since it's just the cloud. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about SignalR, or as my colleague Damian Edwards likes to call it, SignalR. He's from the other island. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how you can use SignalR with Windows Azure. There's a couple of good places where you would need to do that. I was tweeting with a gentleman earlier, and he said he specifically wanted to see something. Sir, are you here? Scale out guy? Raise your hand. Okay, I got all three. Okay, so I'm going to show you all three. So you'll never have a scale out question again. All right? So we're going to go into all this stuff. I'm going to talk about all of it today. There's this pulse check thing that I like to do before I get started. Anybody played with SignalR yet? Keep your hands up if you're still addicted to it. Anybody else? Anybody? Okay, cool. Who has not touched it at all? Who's only done it in JavaScript? Okay, cool. This will be fun. All right, a little bit about me. If you were in here earlier, I'm sorry you've already seen this slide. My name is Brady Gaster. I'm a program manager on the Windows Azure SDK team. I sit in that little bitty layer between you and the cloud. So if you have any suggestions on how to make it better in any of the languages that we support, throw a rock at me. We'll talk. All right. You can find me on Twitter. It's absolutely the best way to get in touch with me. I also have a weblog. You can tell how old I am. I call it a web blog. BradyGaster.com. I talk about things like SignalR, websites, API, Azure, all those fun things. You can email me. I might not get back to you before Tuesday, but I will get back to you. If you have any questions about Azure topics, SignalR, ASP.NET, hit me up. I may not be able to answer your question, but I promise not to ignore you. If I can't answer it, I will bounce it to somebody who can answer it, like I did earlier today. A little personal information. I have one wife, 2 sons, 2 chihuahuas, 2 guitars, and 3 microcontrollers. I never get to play with any of these because I have all of those. All right? So, that's me. Let's end the date. Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Anybody ever heard that quote before? If you've never seen SignalR before, this quote will make sense to you once you have. Okay? If you have seen SignalR, you're probably going, oh yeah, that's it. Okay, what I like to say is that there's a Zen of SignalR. It is a series of abstractions around 2 words that don't go together. Persistent HTTP. For those of you that haven't yet played with SignalR, did you just feel the bzz go off? Because those 2 words don't go together. Why don't those 2 words go together? What is HTTP? What kind of a protocol is it? Right. SignalR breaks that rule in a couple of different ways. Now this abstractions guy that we've got up here, there's a couple of different ways that you can do or simulate, hence the term abstraction, real time over HTTP. Anybody want to guess number 1? WebSockets. That's the best way. That's the fastest way. It's an open connection. Real fast. There's a couple of other ways that you can do it. Server-sent events. Polling, which you've probably done before, show of hands. Your boss said, I need it to be like real time, and you go, I want a poller. Okay? Well, that's what it eventually falls back to. So Damian and David like to go through, and the rest of their team, they like to trickle down through all the different ways that you can do real time. And they pick the one that you can do. You meaning your client and your server. We got a slide to kind of illustrate that here in a moment. Why would I want to do that? Why wouldn't I want to just go against WebSockets? Do you think WebSockets is going to be the last real-time framework that people come out with for HTTP? Yeah, I didn't think so. If you write to SignalR, once a new thing comes out, Damian and David are going to retrofit SignalR with that new thing. Guess what? As long as you've written your code to SignalR, you don't have to change anything. It just figures it out on the fly in parties. Plenty of seats up here. I promise not to spit on you. Okay? All right. Here is SignalR with old servers and clients. I just want to give you a little bit of a graphic here to kind of explain what this is like for those of you who haven't seen it yet. The client goes, you got data, got data, got data, got data, got data. The server goes, yup. The client goes, cool, got data, got data, got data, got data, got data. And what it'll do is it'll kind of say, do you have any data? For 30 seconds. And when the server doesn't say anything, it goes, okay, do you have any data? And it'll ask again. And once the server says yes, it goes, cool, breaks the connection, starts it over again. Got any data? So that's how it works if you're using an old client or an old server or both. And by old, I mean it doesn't support WebSockets. All right, it'll just back off and figure out what to do. You can test this out. You can write a little SignalR app like the one I'm going to show you today, one of the numerous that I'm going to show you today. And you can run it on like IS5, IE7. And then you can like watch it in Fiddler. And it looks like a ping, like a real long ping. All right? Then you upgrade that to like IS8 and you open it up in IE10. And then you'll actually see the WebSocket negotiation conversation going on. And that shows you that the same code goes up and goes down, figures out how to work best. How many of you are thinking, well, IIS will freak out after however many simultaneous connections land on it? Anybody having that problem with it? Let me solve that problem for you. Have you heard of asynchronous programming? That's SignalR. Okay? Asynchronous programming in SignalR basically means that the threads don't block on the server. So I can make a connection and basically just async waits for me. So we're not blocking on either place. All right. Here's how it works on modern clients or servers. You've got to have both. You've got to have a modern client and a modern server for this to work. The client says, hey, dude, do you party in real time? Server goes, of course, man. All the cool kids are doing it now. And they go, let's party. And then they just start the conversation. It's an open socket. How many of you have seen one of Mads Christensen's videos or Hanselman's videos, either from last week or from Build and all that, where he's talking about browser link? Have you guys heard about this browser link thing? Mads opens up a IE window or a Chrome window, he changes some code, he hits save, and it just updates automatically. Okay, the way that works is SignalR. He's hosting a SignalR hub inside of Visual Studio, and it creates an active connection back to the browser. That is a live socket between the client and, in this case, the server, which happens to be Visual Studio. And the way he's hosting that is through something called Owen. Anybody heard of Owen or Katana? Okay, I'm going to show you how to do self-hosting today so that if you wanted to build your own browser link, God knows why, it's already kind of there, you could. And you could put it inside of whatever you want. And we're going to put it inside of a Windows Azure worker role. Nice thing about that is you don't even need IIS to do real-time HTTP. You can do all this in Katana. All right. Here's my silly starter demo. Okay. All right, now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly open this up, and I'm going to walk through how this works for those of you that haven't seen SignalR or haven't partied on it yet. For those of you that have, just stay with me. It'll get cooler. All right? I'm going to show you 3 really quick demos, like back to back. I'm going to cheat a little bit. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open up my hit counter hub. Now this is just a basic website, and you'll see that I have an HTML page, and I have a C# class called hit counter hub. The hub is kind of the meat and potatoes of SignalR. All right? So you'll see that I've made my own hub, and I'm inheriting from hub right here. And now I've got a static variable. Yeah, this is a web app. Shouldn't use static variables in web app. It's a demo. Calm down. Okay? Imagine a database. Just pretend. Okay? We got a factory method or something cool. Now I've got this record hit method. Okay? Has anybody seen dynamic programming in C# and when you did the hair on the back of your neck kind of stood up and you freaked out, fainted a little bit, had to have some vodka? Then you kind of got it, and you're like, I think I understand it now. Give anybody heartburn? It did me. All right, let me show you when it made sense. So I've got this clients guy right here. And what I can do is I can just say this.clients or this.context. Let me zoom in a little bit for you. All right. And I can say this.clients.all. Before I do that, think about this for a second. Now let's say you've got multiple clients connected to one hub and you want to communicate with all of them. So we're talking about clients. Looking at this IntelliSense window, somebody who's not yet played with SignalR, tell me which one of those properties you think I ought to use if I want to broadcast to every connected client. Somebody. Oh, right. Hard, huh? All right. Let's say I want to call back to myself. Caller. Let's say I want to call everybody else. Okay, you're already SignalR programmers. Okay, you've already figured this out. Now here's where it gets a little trippy. So I'm going to say client dot. What do you mean dynamic expression? What I mean is I can hang anything off there that I want. I can call any method that I want. As long as the client knows what to do when I call that method, I am going to be okay. And let me show you why. So I'm going to call clients.all.hitRecorded, and I'm just going to pass it the hit count. How many times I've been incrementing my schnizzle, for those of you that know what that word means. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go over here to my JavaScript code. And I'm going to zoom in on this code for you. And what you're going to see right here is that I'm going to new up what's called a connection back to the server. This is a SignalR connection. Now what this guy is going to do, it's going to be the active connection back to the server that I'm going to instantiate. Anybody ever do add web reference? Probably showing my age here. You guys know what I'm talking about? Remember that reference.cs file? What do you call that guy? In programming terms, a proxy. Okay, you've seen proxies, right? Now if I look at this guy right here, create hub proxy, and I'm passing it hit counter. Now what I did here was I actually used the hub name attribute and I gave this guy a name. The reason I gave him a name is I don't want to have to call hit counter hub because it's just too much typing and I'm a lazy developer. All right, so I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to skip over the on guy right here and you'll see that I've got con.start and I'm passing it a callback method. Now the first time I did SignalR, I did what you'll probably do if you haven't seen this demo. I went like that. And it didn't work. There was no connection. It said, hey, the connection hasn't been established. You can't do anything with me yet. And I thought, self, I wonder if David and Damien were nice enough to just make that an asynchronous method. And I changed it and passed it a JavaScript callback, and it worked. They were thinking about you, the developer that doesn't want to have to figure out the API. I'm one too. I figured this out just sitting at home tinkering with it about 18 months ago. Now on, that's when it gets trippy. In on, the first thing I'm going to pass it is the name of the method that I expect the server to call. Process that. In JavaScript, I'm going to say the server is going to call this method, and when he does, I want you to run the callback that I'm going to provide to you. I'm even going to give you the argument right here, and then I'm just going to slap it on the page. I'm going to have a hit counter. You've probably seen this done in Java, like 1988. It's going to be cooler now, because it's all in HTML. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom back out. I'm going to go ahead and run this guy. Before I do, I'm going to open up this hit counter hub. That's just going to open up my default HTML page. And again, for those of you that have done SignalR, this is kind of boring. I promise you it'll get better. So there's one. There's two. There's three. And there's four. Is that cool? You like that? If you haven't seen SignalR, does that kind of make sense? Of course not. It's persistent HTTP. It shouldn't make sense. Now let's make it even more interesting. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to override a method. Now notice I haven't had to do anything hub specific. I just made my own method up, called my own method back on the client. The client knows what to do, and everybody parties, and everything's cool. Now I'm going to have an override called onDisconnected. Do you mean to tell me that the server is going to know when the dude closes his browser? Really? Yeah, that's what's going to happen. All right, so I'm going to run this guy. There's a 1. There's a 2. There's a 3. We'll stop at 3, 2, 1. Bam. You guys like that? Is that groovy? Okay. Now I'm going to show you a demo that I promised I would never show, and then I made up my own version of it, so I have to kind of set the stage. This is Damien's move shape demo. Anybody seen this demo yet? Okay. Well, most people haven't, so I'm sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and, I'm not really going to get into deep with this, but I basically got a hub. I'm going to pass it X and Y, and then I've got some squirrely JavaScript code in here that basically just says, hey, whenever they mouse down and move stuff around, I want to, move stuff around on the other monitors too, or on the other browsers. So what I'll do real quick is I'll just hit F5, and I can't take credit for this. This is Damien's. He's the guy that made SignalR with David. This is his demo, but I've got my own version of it. Is that cool? Ooh, we can make games with SignalR. Yeah. We can do all kinds of crazy stuff. Now, who thinks SignalR is just for web pages? It's not. There is a .NET client too. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this guy up. And I've got this wonderful little device right here. Probably seen it. This is not the one version. All right. Now what I've got in this code is I've got the same kind of thing. It's exactly the same hub. No changes whatsoever to this guy. And then I've got a whole bunch of Connect code that only Clint really understands, so I won't go into deep with that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you right here, and this is kind of important. What I want to do is I'm going to show you these two guys side by side. So this will make a little bit more sense why this is so super valuable. So here's the JavaScript code that you've already seen. New hub connection, create hub proxy. Here's the .NET code. New hub connection, create hub proxy. And then I've got start, just like before. They've basically got syntactic parity between the JavaScript side and the C# side. Why would they want to do that? Because they know you're a lazy developer and they want you to make it easy for you to do stuff with it. The easier it is, the less you have to learn when you jump back and forth between languages, the more you're probably going to want to use it and the more creative ways you're going to find to use it. Like this. So now I'm going to run this one more time. It's going to pop up our little box over here. I'm going to go right here. And now I can move it from .NET code. My daemon can send signals up to the cloud or to my own little IIS server that I'm using right here. And you can see that I can move that box around directly in my C# code. That cool? You guys like that? All right, cool. You know, there's this thing called applause. Thank you. We can continue this conversation now. All right. Well, this is what we've talked about so far. You've got your .NET client. You've got your JavaScript client. There's an iOS client that the community built. We're going to rebuild it. We're going to make it better. Like the $6 million man, we have the technology. We can make it better. I'm again showing my age. I'm sorry. But we have these different clients. SignalR is an open source project. In fact, it at one point, and I still believe, is the #1 most watched C# project on GitHub. That should tell you something interesting. People dig this. Now we've also got hosts. You can host this inside of ASP.NET or you can host this inside of Owen. Damien and David might get a little bit upset with me because I think that they've deprecated the ASP.NET host. I think now it's always going to be hosted in Owen. There's probably a way that you can make it go with ASP.NET. There's still a NuGet package that you can party on with ASP.NET. But Owen's going to be kind of the way moving forward, especially if you want to host it yourself inside of, like, I don't know, a console app or a worker role. So you do have that capability. For the gentleman that asked the question earlier, we also have this thing called a backplane. I'll explain backplanes later on. If you're moving into the cloud, if you're moving into Windows Azure, then you have to make one very important assumption. One day you're going to be in a web farm. That's just the way it is. If you were in the scaling conversation earlier, or you've seen any of Mr. Guthrie's demos, then you know that we can scale out your website. If you scale out your website, the hub lives on the server. I've got a chart to kind of show you how this works later on, but basically you have to put a backplane behind all of your web servers, or the web servers won't talk to one another because the hub lives in one place. So that's why the backplanes exist, and we have 3 of them: SQL, Service Bus, and Redis. I'm going to quote Damien on this, but we were having a conversation one day because I wanted to write one in Windows Azure caching. And he said, why do you want to do that? And I told him, and he goes, see previous message. So I scrolled up a little bit in my link, and he said, we have the SQL, the Service Bus, and the Redis. So I called him, and I said, why can't I build one? Like, some dudes build one in MongoDB. There's like a bunch that are growing up. They're really hard to write, first of all. They're squirrely. So I just want to point out that if you want to write your own backplane, just don't. It's hard. So Damien told me, he said, put it like this. He said, if you're running on premises, SQL is going to be a good option. If you're running in Windows Azure, Service Bus is going to be a good option. And for the hippies, we have Redis. And that's Damien's words, not mine, so you can yell at him for it. And I'm not picking on Redis. I've actually got a Redis server running right now. I'm going to show you how that all works together. Redis is a very fast backplane. It's fantastic. I was actually interviewing David and Damien on Channel 9. I was about 10 minutes late running from another meeting. At Microsoft, we had lots of meetings. So I'm running to the meeting, and I emailed them, and I say, hey, I'm going to be about 10 minutes late. And when I walk in, David's standing there coding. I was like, what are you doing? And he spins his computer around, and he says, I just wrote the Redis backplane for SignalR. And I was like, in 10 minutes? He said, yeah. He wrote it in 10 minutes. Now, it's been refined since then, and they've kind of overhauled the whole backplane architecture, so it's been redone. But I do want to point out that's how smart these guys are. Dude just had a whim. Wrote it while he was waiting for me because I was late. Pretty cool. Those guys are rock stars. Now, I've shown you how to use the clients. I promise that we're going to get to the backplanes. It's a promise that I made, so I got to keep it. We're going to get to the backplanes because they're really important. Anybody running in Windows Azure already? You like this idea of real time? Or anybody running their own web farm somewhere? Got a website that you're farming out? Okay. That's when the backplanes will be really important. But what I'm going to show you right now is how you can do this in either a worker role or in like your own console exe if you wanted to host it yourself. Now, I'm going to run this in a worker role. I'm not going to fire up a console, but just kind of imagine the same code kind of applied to a console application. Now, this particular area is going, pardon? It's a very sensitive button. Is going to grow pretty extensively as the ASP.NET team completes what's called Katana. So you're going to see more of that coming out, in Visual Studio 2013. There's going to be more adoption of Katana. You're going to be able to do more stuff like this, and there's going to be more designer support. What I'm going to show you here is kind of grassroots. I'm just using the Owen NuGet packages, which is pretty much the same thing, but you're going to have better tooling support inside of Visual Studio around the Owen world. Now, what I want to do real quick is I want to point out that what Owen is, if you haven't heard of Owen, it's the open web interface for .NET. There are a couple different projects that live on top of Owen. Anybody ever heard of NancyFX or Fubu MVC? Okay, those guys use Owen. SignalR also uses Owen. Some of the web API functionality you can also host inside of Owen yourself. Why would you want to do that? Because maybe you don't need everything in system.web. Maybe you just need a simple HTTP process to host a widget, and that's when you would actually want to go ahead and use Katana or Owen, because all you need is a couple lines of code to host your thing and you can party. Nice thing about that is you don't have to maintain an entire web server. You just write an exe, host your Owen app, throw a web API in it, throw a SignalR hub in it, and off you go. Howard Deerking, the PM of that team, has an article coming out in MSDN Magazine this month or next, and he actually hosts pretty much everything in the ASP.NET stack on top of Owen because he wanted to just show you how versatile it was. Now, don't run for the hills. It doesn't mean that like we're overhauling everything. It's just going to be another option if you don't want to have the overhead of running an entire web server. I want to point that out. Don't panic. Promise. All right. So what I'll do next is I'm going to show you this guy. This is basically a real-time trace writer. I do a lot of stuff in worker roles, and sometimes I want to know what's going on in my worker role. I don't want to have to log into the thing or copy my stuff out to somewhere. I want to see it on the screen. So I came up with this idea kind of a long time ago at the very beginning of my Azure career so that I could wire up my own trace listener, listen for messages coming from my worker role, and just stream them on a web page. So this is just going to show you like how you might be able to make that work. And what's interesting is I have no functionality whatsoever inside of this hub. Why is that important? Because as long as both sides know about the methods, you don't have to have anything in your hub. As long as both sides know, if I say do work, you do this, everything is going to be okay. It's basically just a proxy for commands back and forth over the wire. Now what I'll do next is I'm going to show you this Owen host. Now there's a couple of conventions around Owen and Katana, and you'll just have to kind of learn those as Katana comes out. But basically one of the things that you do is you make a class, and usually the class is called like startup, and you have a method in that class called configuration that takes iAppBuilder, and then maybe some other arguments. I'm doing it as basic as I can. iAppBuilder is basically that Owen thing that you can attach plumbing onto. So I can attach plumbing for SignalR. I can attach plumbing for Web API. I can attach plumbing for whatever else other stuff like Nancy that I want to. Notice that I'm not implementing an interface or inheriting from any kind of a class. This is a convention. Owen is a conventional way about doing simplistic server-side web development. Okay? A long-winded discussion of Owen is sort of beyond the scope of this. What I want to show you is that you can self-host SignalR. You can also do the same thing in Web API. If you've ever seen one of Dan Ross' sessions, he does this all the time. It's fantastic to watch. All right? And what I do is I say app builder, this guy right here, map hubs, give you one guess where that lives. It's an extension method that hangs out of this namespace. All right? I just say map hubs, and then I say new hub configuration. And there are a couple of other properties that I could pass here. Enable JavaScript proxies. I could turn that to false. Resolver. That's so that I can do my own dependency injection inside of my SignalR hubs, just like you can in MVC and API. I could tell it which resolver I want it to use. That's a little Archinaut right now. We're not going to do that. But all I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this guy right here. Enable cross-domain equals true. Again, don't panic. You're writing the server side and the client side. It's not like somebody is going to send a virus over SignalR. You can't do that anyway. You can't send byte arrays. You can only send primitive types. You can only send strings. I mean, I guess if you had control over the server, but then you have other problems to worry about. You know what I mean? If I'm going to send you code and then reconstruct it on the server, you've probably made an accident or two along the way, right? All right, so don't panic. The reason we have that enable cross-domain is so I can have this web server, and this web server, and this web server, and this exe, and this phone app, and this Windows app, and they can all talk back to one SignalR hub that I can host however I want inside of Owen. Now, so I've got my hub, I've got my host, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you this real-time trace listener. I'm going to do this so you can kind of see everything here. I'll zoom in on it a little bit. And what I want to point out is this global host right here. This is sort of your server-side host abstraction for SignalR. Everything that you'd ever want to do on the server side at the core level is going to hang off of global host. So what I can do is I can say globalhost.connectionmanager.getHub and I can pass it a generic argument of the type of hub that I want. As long as that inherits from hub, I'm going to be okay. Nice thing is, you don't even have to do that. You can just do it like this if you want. All right, so I can just not pass the argument. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and pass the argument and party on it. Maybe that was not true because I had an error there, but I've seen it that way before. Maybe they've changed the signature. Now, what you'll also see here is I'm doing this clients.all thing again. Think about it like this. When you saw that hub that I showed you earlier and I did this .clients blah, 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 this is the same kind of thing. This is going to give me back an instance of the hub that I'm asking for, and I can just call methods off of it. Clients.all, clients.caller, whatever I want to do. And I'm going to basically tell the client, I'm going to call the receive trace method, and I'm going to pass it a message. Now let me show you what class this guy inherits from. Trace listener. Anybody ever written their own trace listener? Saved to a database, table storage, something like that? Really not that exciting until you see it happen in real time. Then it kind of makes a little bit more sense. So, what I'm going to do here, got all that guy wired up, and I'll show you my worker role code. Anybody ever written a worker role? Anybody ever written a Windows service? Guess what? You've written a worker role. Just one runs on Windows and one runs on cloud. It's really the only difference. Okay, so it's the same kind of idea. It's just an ever-running thing. Kind of the same idea. Now, what I'm going to do here is when it starts up, and I'll tell you why I do this, because if you try to do this in config, it gets pretty nasty. Because the thing will start up and it'll try to instantiate a connection to the SignalR hub, and there's no HTTP context because the first thing it does is read from config. So if it tries to read from config before everything is spun up and it tries to host that hub, it's going to freak out. So it's nice to do it inside of your C# code because then you don't have to worry about the lifetime. As soon as your C# code starts running, you host your listener fires up your Owen host hosts your hub, and you're ready to go. You're ready to party. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you the last piece of this guy, and that's this default.html file. And what you'll see that I've done here is I'm passing in the URL. So before, when I called this guy, it looked like this. Now you can also pass it a URL. There's a couple of other arguments that you can pass it. For now, I'm just going to pass it the URL. There's like an options object that you can tell it to do all kinds of things, like you can specify its timeout, blah, blah, blah. All kinds of stuff you can do there. I'm just going to pass it a URL. Now, if I just hit F5 right here, what's going to happen is it's going to fire up my Windows Azure Compute emulator. It's going to host my worker role, and everything is going to be ready to pop. But I don't want to do that because we're talking about the cloud. So I am going to show you where I've got this running inside of Windows Azure, and I'm going to comment this guy out. And remember the code that I had out there. In my worker role, all I'm really saying every time the run method comes through, every 10 seconds, I'm just going to trace cloud services running. Now imagine you've got hundreds of lines of code inside of this worker role and you've got trace messages all over the place. Just kind of figure out, if you're writing a lot of trace information, you have a couple of options. One, you can download it from your blob storage account, import it to Excel, or you can create your own trace listener that hosts a SignalR hub, attach a website to it, and whenever you want to know what's going on, you can just get it down. Okay, just want to point that out. You probably want to add some authentication inside of your hub method. Might be a good idea, but you get the idea. Does anybody not understand what I'm saying there? That's really the point for a hub, is you would put logic inside of that hub for things like authorization. So basically we have code on either side that's just calling. So my tracer is going to be calling a method on my hub, and my JavaScript code is going to be listening for that method on the hub. And if you look right here, you'll see that I've got this guy running right here, real-time tracing. So that is the code that you see right here on my computer, but it's actually running up in Windows Azure as a cloud service. So what I'm going to do is I've got this project set as my startup. I'm going to hit F5. We may have to wait a couple of seconds for a trace message to come through. But really all I've got is an unordered list there, and I'm getting trace messages directly from Windows Azure over SignalR right here in my web browser. Is that neat? You like that? Does that kind of give you the ability to find out what's going on in your application? Now, if you're not running in Azure, you could do everything that I just shown you inside of a worker role, inside of a console app, or inside of an EXE on somewhere on your network. And then all your guys could connect to it and they could get real-time data. Now, I do want to point out one very important thing here. Sounds like the perfect technology. Everything's beginning to look like a nail. I can't wait to figure out all the places that I can use this, and I can't wait to change all the applications that I should have had this when I read them the first time. Let me go ahead and tell you something. SignalR is real-time. SignalR is not guaranteed messaging. You can't replace queuing with SignalR. Okay, that would not work. You may drop a couple of messages because it's going so fast. Right now they've got benchmarks of something like 50,000 simultaneous clients can be connected to one hub on one server. Now imagine when you do scale out, how big that number would get. Millions and millions and millions. As long as you've got servers, you can have fun with it. Okay? Does that kind of make sense? So you can basically do this inside of an EXE on your network if you want to. Or you can do it in Azure. This is why we're here today. Okay. Now, so we've talked about hosting. Now I'm going to show you how it can integrate on the server side with other ASP.NET parts. I've already shown you this code. This is basically a way for you to be able to call a SignalR hub on the server side. You say, give me the hub context. I want the hub that somebody else has already instantiated on the server side, and I want to be able to send messages to it, and all the clients that are connected to it are going to receive those messages. So you've already seen how to do this. Now in this demo, anybody use Web API yet? Groovy. You like REST, huh? Is it fun? All right, in this demo, what we're going to do is we're going to send a message to the server using Web API. It's going to hit a controller. I'm going to turn around and use the code that we've already seen here. I'm going to fire a message on my SignalR hub, and then all the clients that are connected to that guy are going to receive that message. So you're going to see how we can communicate in using Web API and then communicate back out using SignalR. Now, I'm not making a recommendation here. You've already seen me go in and out using SignalR. But this might be a way of you like kind of hooking in to see what's going on inside your API if you want to. It's pretty good if you just want to monitor stuff and see what's going on. Just an idea. Trying to give you ideas to party with here. All right. So now what I'll do is I'll go back into my handy dandy little folder, and I want to go down here to Hub Context Sharing. It's called Inversion of Control Sample, but it was a demo that kind of evolved, and then I unevolved it. So now I made it a lot easier. I was kind of showing how Web API, MVC, and SignalR can wrap around one IOC container, and they can share services. So if you've got like an Inject or a Unity controller and you want to throw all of your services into it, anybody done this yet? Partying with IOC and DI? Okay, cool. You can put all your stuff into one container, and then you can write a dependency resolver for MVC, a dependency resolver for Web API, and a dependency resolver for SignalR, and you do have to write one for each. And they all wrap around the same container, and they can share services. It can get really dangerous when you do stuff like that. Now, what I'll do real quick is I'm just going to show you this pretty simple controller that I've got here. It's a messages controller. I'm not really doing a lot. I'm just calling get. And when I call get, I'm passing it a message. And just like before, I'm going to get the hub context of a message hub, and I'm going to call on message received. And that's just going to fire that message up to all the individual connected clients that happen to be connected to that hub at that time. I'm going to show you the JavaScript code real quick. That's not what I want to show you. I'm going to show you this guy. And once I do this, I'll actually show you a little bit of magic on the client. Now again, it's pretty much the same code. Brady, you're showing me the same code over and over and over again. Why are you doing that? Because it's the same 2 lines of code. That's how easy it is in .NET and in JavaScript. Then I've got my on. I'm going to handle my message. And whenever somebody sends a message, I'm actually going to call my Web API controller, send it a variable, and I'm going to just, update an unordered list. And I've got this init method right here. I can show you what that init method does in my hub. Really doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. Get the idea? I could get rid of that guy if I wanted to. I'm not going to, though. Now I'm just going to hit F5, and what you're going to see is kind of 2 sides. 2 sides on the page. I'll show you this so you can see how these guys integrate with one another. The ASP.NET team is a very cooperative team. We like to share information with one another. Share some info. Now you see this guy sent it and received it. This guy just sent it. Now see, he's sending it here. This guy didn't send anything. This just shows you how Web API and SignalR can basically share that conversation. Now imagine if you did this in Katana. You used Katana or Owen to host your Web API controller and to host your SignalR hub. Now you can put whatever you want on the server side, just do crazy stuff. Okay, so I just want to point out that that's the nice thing about the server side, is that we can share all that stuff together. Okay, good stuff? All right, I promise I'll have time at the end for questions. Just want to get through everything. And there's a lot of stuff, and I made the promise, so I got to get to it. All right, moving right along. That's the demo we just saw. Here's how we do scale out. Pardon me, I'm parched. Here's how we do scale out. Now, without scale out, here's what happens. Client A sends a message, he gets it back. Client B sends a message, he gets it back. Now, this is sort of making an assumption that the first client hits the first server, the second client hits the second server. If the first client and the second client happen to hit the same server, the messages would go back to each one because they're landing on the same server. But if, for some unforeseen, unfortunate reason, each client hits its own server, you're not going to be able to share those messages because the hub lives on the server, period. So what you do, you drop in a backplane. You drop in a backplane, and the first one is Service Bus, second one is SQL, and the third one is Redis, the present. Now here's what happens when a client sends in a message for a backplane or to a SignalR hub that's backplaned. The message comes in, it hits the backplane, then it comes back out, et cetera, et cetera. So in this case, you're basically putting that guy behind it, behind the wall of servers, so that any message that comes into the server is fed to the backplane, and then the backplane just feeds it back out to all the other servers. Make sense? Sort of like you're load balancing SignalR, which is exactly what you're doing. And when you do this, you pretty much have infinite scale. You can just go crazy. Now the first one, in case you're not running in Azure, or you are, and you want to do this inside of SQL, first way that you could do this is you could actually do a backplane that uses SQL. Now all of these are NuGet packages. You can pull down all of these from NuGet. All right? You don't have to do anything crazy. Everything with SignalR is put into NuGet. Brady, this backplane thing, man, I don't know. Sounds like a bunch of IaaS and VMs and just async happiness yet badness all at one time. Like, this is going to be insanely hard. I'll never be able to figure out how to make this work. Trust me, if I can do it, you can do it. That's it. That's the convention the SignalR guys, who you may have figured out are kind of opinionated cats. Look at their fluent interfaces and stuff. They have an opinionated syntax. Don't you think that comes from somewhere? So what they do is they say when you build a backplane, hang it off the dependency resolver and make it really easily discoverable. If you've used extension methods, you can figure out how to use a backplane. It's just that easy. Oh, but the database structure is probably out of control. It's probably really hard to create. Let me show you how easy that is. I want to comment this out first. I'm going to go over here to my SQL management tool. What did I call it? See how my web config. Yes, I am partying on SQL Express. I'm going to make a new database. Now you have to do this. Unlike EF, it will not scaffold your database from nothing. You have to actually make the database. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this up so we can see the tables. There's nothing in my database. Nothing in my database. Doing a Doug Henning for you. All right, now what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and make sure this code is compiled with this code commented out so that you can kind of get the point. Kind of see what's going on. I have these two batch files right here, start server A and start server B. One of them will fire up IIS Express on port 80, port 8080 or something, 8000 maybe. We'll know when I hit the bookmark, put it that way. Okay, so one of them will fire up IIS on one port, the other one will fire up IIS on the second port. Both instances of IIS will be looking at this folder where my code happens to be. We're simulating a load-balanced environment. We're going to do this 3 times, okay, because I want to show you how easy it is to get all these guys working. And then we're going to show you the Redis one with a VM, and that'll be neat. So what I want to do is zoom back out. I want to run server A. I want to run server B. I want to make a new guy here. I don't want him to resolve all the way out. And I want to hit this guy. And I want to hit this guy. So I've got one running on 8080. And I've got one running on 8081. And I don't have them backplaned. Man, he said it would work. Really? Shoot, did I do something wrong? I guess I need to drop in that backplane you talked about. That one line of code sounds so hard. It just sounds so complicated. Compile. I'm gonna have to compile too. Jeez. Oh. Oh, great. That didn't happen. Of course it would happen on stage. I've done this like 100 times. All right, let me just do it again. Because I'm not going down that easy. All right. F5. F5. There we go. All right, so see the messages are coming through both of them now? So if I go over here and I hit F5, there's our messages. So it looks at the database and it says, hey, do you have these tables that I've got here? Oh, create them. Boom. And parties. Somebody asked me the other day in Australia, can I get the SQL for that? Yeah. I don't have it. But there's this thing called Reflector. Okay, so you could get in the Reflector. And then I think it's all up in Codeplex. So you could probably go ahead and grab that. And I bet it's probably in the content folder whenever you pull down the NuGet. Point is, you could get the SQL if you really wanted it. I don't know why you'd want it. I mean, it just worked, right? So, except for the IIS thing. That's a different team, okay? So, all right. I know those guys too. All right, so that's how we can do this in SQL. Now I'll show you the one that you probably want to use if you're running in Azure. Nothing against running the SQL one in Azure. That's perfectly fine. But the next one that I'm going to show you is going to be scaling with Service Bus. Anybody played with Service Bus yet in any context or another? Okay, cool. So you guys know pub sub. You got to get the idea here. Clemens Vasters, the mad scientist, he wrote the first prototypical scale out thing for Service Bus. Damien and David had written one for SQL, and Clemens came along and he said, well, I want to build one for Service Bus. So he built it, and I looked at the code for it, my head exploded. But what he actually does in there, which is really cool, is he takes the SignalR message, and you can actually, in the first one, I don't think you can still do this. I'm pretty sure you can't anymore. Maybe you can, I'm not sure, I just haven't looked at it enough. But in the first one, you could actually specify how many Service Bus topics you wanted those messages to go across. He would actually take your SignalR message and shard it across 4 or 5 topics. And once it got through the topic on the other side, it would put it all back together again. Now, why would you want to do that? So that you don't exceed the Service Bus message size. You don't start spending that much money. He basically split it up so that it would divide it across the topics dynamically and then reassemble them back on the other side. You know, feel free to go crazy with that code. That was crazy. I looked at it for about 3 days and I had to take a vacation. But it's amazing. And when I talked to David and Damien about it, they actually told me something interesting, that he had thought about it for about 4 months and wrote it in like 2 days. So it was something that he chewed on for a while and got it right. Now, just like before, we're going to hang everything off that dependency resolver. And what I've done is I've gone in and I've created a new SignalR name, a new Service Bus namespace. And if I click this guy, just to show you how this would work, you go right here to connection information. This guy will pop open. Oh, that's not the right one. Wanted to do it on the first page. You select it, and then you do connection information, and that's when it pops up. And then you've got this handy-dandy little copy button. Yep, I'm cool with that. It'll copy that to my clipboard. And then you would go into your code, and you would just paste it in right there. Now, I've already done all that work, and I won't go through the process of showing you like firing up both servers and then recompiling and firing up both servers again. I'll just leave the code alone, compile it, and fire up both servers, and you'll see that this will indeed start to party on top of Service Bus. Now, since we're not running in Azure, the first hit will probably make an outbound connection out to Service Bus, so it'll look a little bit slower than SQL because the SQL is running right here. Once it creates all those topics and spins itself up, it's going to be perfectly cool. So what I'll do right now is I'll go over here and I'll hit F5. Oh, it was an ASPX page. I can't let that lie. There. Okay, there we go. And now I'll go to this one and I'll hit F5 again. The messages should go back and forth. Maybe I need to recompile. There we go. Now it's connected. There. See how the connected popped in just a second or two later? I actually had to reach out and make a connection out to Service Bus. So that's that. Now, I've never shown all three of these on stage, and I might actually get to finish it and have a trick demo for you. All right, so that's SQL, and that's Service Bus. Sir, are you comfortable? Is that good? Okay, cool. I'm still going to show you the Redis one because I think you specifically asked about that. And what I've got, let me show you one little bookmark right here. I'm going to click on this guy. And this is the GitHub project made by MS OpenTech. You guys heard of MS OpenTech? It's the open source group that Microsoft spun off. Great little company. They do all kinds of cool stuff. Like Redis. They took the Redis specification and they wrote a Windows Redis server. I can tell you exactly how I got the Redis exe. I downloaded this code. I opened it up in Studio. I compiled it. It creates 6 exes. I take redis_server.exe and I double click it. And then I just copy the port number down, change my config to point to my Redis scale out, and it'll start communicating. So what I've done is I fired up a VM. And this is a VM running up inside of Windows Azure. You'll see right here. I wonder if this will work. No, it won't. So I've got gastervm.cloudapp.net. I'm going to double click on Redis server. Now it's running. If you don't want to do this inside of a console app, you could look at their code, tweak it, host it inside of a Windows exe if you want to. Do it inside of a worker role, whatever. It's open source. Have fun. All right, so I'm going to shrink this window down. And now I'll go over here again. Maybe. I'll go into my Redis folder. And what you have to do with this guy, I do want to point out, and I think I might need to log into the portal. I need to pull this guy up. I need to pull up another subscription because that Gaster VM is running in my work subscription. I've got my MSDN subscription and I've got 4. or work in Azure. You've got to have a lot of subscriptions. All right, so I've got this Gaster VM running right here. If I click this guy and I go to endpoints, you see this? This is the Redis endpoint. I have to specifically go into here, do an add the port that I want Redis to be listening on, and then I would obviously have to go into my Windows firewall settings and open that port up in my Windows VM as well. I'll point this out so that if you do this on your local network and it flips out on you, you still got to open a port in the firewall. If you do it in Windows Azure, you still got to open a port in your server firewall, and then you have to tell us through the portal that you are cool. All right, and that will open up that port and everything will flow through. Now if I go right over here into my code, it's where we all like to be, and I look at this guy, just like before, there's my global host dependency resolver, and rather than use SQL, I am doing use Redis. I'm passing it the URL of my server where my Redis happens to be running. I'm passing it the port, and I'm just giving it a simple name right here to just tell it like it's like a label for the port. So I'm just telling it that. And if I wanted to, I could secure that and I could pass it a username and password. Anybody heard of Redis to Go? They're an online Redis provider. First 300 times I did this demonstration, I did this using Redis to Go. And then I thought, I probably ought to do this in an ISVM. So went through the process of doing it. Really easy. It took me about an hour. So if you want to do this with Redis, it's really easy to do it. You can hot swap it in and out. And if you've noticed the code that's pretty similar, I've got basically the same thing. I've got my global ASAX file, and I could pick which backplane I want. If you're scared that one might not work, you could just put all three in there and put a config switch in your app settings and just change it whenever you want to switch from SQL to Service Bus to whatever. So I do want to point out you could go crazy partying like that if you wanted to. Okay. So with all that being said, I'm going to go over here. I'm going to start up my server one more time. This is just going to start up a local instance of IIS just like before. I'm going to hit F5 right here, and you'll see the stream coming over here in the server. I'm going to go and do this one as well. And once they both stay connected, I'm going to go over here to my VM and look at there. We'll see clients accepted. 2 clients connected to 0 slaves. Accepted this IP, accepted that IP, et cetera, et cetera. So that is Redis running on Windows, accepting inbound connections from my 2 IIS servers running right here. Now imagine if you're running your website in Windows Azure websites. You might have 10 instances. You could put Redis behind them. You could put SQL behind them, Service Bus, whatever you want. Now you can scale out your website however big and bad you want to, and SignalR will continue to work because you've done the backplane. All right, now what I'll do here is I'll just really quickly send a couple of messages to show you that it's working again. There we go. So that's how you would backplane SignalR. All right, cool. Now I'm going to disconnect from this guy. I love this. I can use my swipe directly from whenever I'm in a VM. I just think that's cool. For some reason, the whole fact that it emulates that and sends it up is, I don't know, kind of groovy to me. All right, so all that being said, go back here to my demos. So we've done the SQL, we've done the Service Bus, and we've done Redis. And as we say at Microsoft, I will give you back 7 minutes of your life. Thank you for sitting through this session. If you have any questions, I'll be here after this. Sorry to just drop it on you like that, but that's all I had. If you want me to get really brave, I could try to show you the other demo that I've got. It might take me a second to set it up, but it's a chat board that runs in Windows Phone, Windows 8, and on the web. You want me to try? Okay, I'll try. I'm not making any promises here, though. It might blow up. I haven't configured it and worked it all out real quick. So I'll try this out. I don't think I've even published the website yet. I haven't done this demo in a few days. Last time I did it was in Australia. Maybe it'll work. Go over here to my SkyDrive. So I keep it there, presentations. Yes, I use all 3. I'm pretty particular about not losing anything. My SignalR and real-time fungi. Here's my chat demo. I want to open this guy up real quick. Now, what I've got in here is I've got a Windows 8 application. I've got a Windows Phone 8 application that I actually have installed on my phone, I think. It's still running on my phone. And then I've got a web application. My web application is where I'm actually hosting my SignalR hub. So the web app has to be running first before I can do anything. So I'm going to go back here and change this to, let's make sure I don't have it running out here. Nope, I don't have it running out there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this out. This actually might be kind of exciting as you get to see the entire thing end to end. So I've got my chat demo application right here, and what I'm going to do is delete my published profile so that we can republish it. And I want to remember what I called the guy. I want to go right here to my main page, and this is going to be my main page in my modern UI app. I just want to get the URL right. And forgive me, I'm going to have to go with AU TechEd because I've got it running on my phone. Don't panic, okay? I know. Go ahead. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and call it that because it worked. Hopefully it'll still work here. If not, we know why. All right. Oh. All right, AU TechEd chat. I'm going to put this in West US. Go ahead and run that guy. And then I'm actually going to publish my website up to Windows Azure from Visual Studio. The URL is autechedchat.azurewebsites.net. Please remember this is being recorded. Please be nice. Please be nice. Say nice things only. If you could see some of the demos that we've done like this, oh boy, the comments people make, it's shameful. So please don't be like that. I'll let you pass since it says AU in the URL, I guess. All right, AU TechEd chat, okay. Publish. Oh, this is only going to be running on one server and one hub. But, God, that's why I use all three. I don't trust any of them. Does anybody else have this problem? Like you like this feature about one and not this feature about the other? All right, so there's our app. If I open up a web browser right here and I hit this, hello from web, hello from web, hello from web. I'm going to open up my phone. I'm not going to look at the screen. Chat demo. See if I can connect. I'm not going to be able to connect because I'm not on the Wi-Fi. Forgive me. See if I can connect to the Wi-Fi. I probably can't. Are there bad messages popping up on the screen yet? Shucks. Oh, there we go. Okay, connect to that guy. But what I want to do now, so I want to go over here to my modern UI app, and I've got this set up to run in the simulator. Yeah, of course there are deployment errors. Let's build it. Let's try this. I'll run on local machine. All right, now that's going to actually fire up the app right here on my computer. Looks like I'm connected. If you could see the website right now, you'd see the messages coming in. I could do this. Somebody sent me a message from the web. Hello from web. Hello from web. Oh. You like that? Is that groovy? And if I go to the web browser, you'll see all the messages coming through. Awesome. Cute water Brady. I hear that's a good thing. Cool. All right. Got a bunch of extra demos in. No extra credit necessary. I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope you see the power of SignalR, and I hope you want to go play with it. Thanks a lot. Enjoy TechEd. If you want to see some real demo fails, come